All right, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the May 8th meeting of the Ames Community School District Board of Directors. I will call the meeting to order and entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved. Second.
Moved by Becker, seconded by Beerbaum. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Passes 6-0. And we will now read our purpose statement and would ask anyone in the room to feel free to join along with us. The Ames Community School District commits to equity and access and empowers every individual to reach their full personal and educational potential. Thank you. Our first item on the agenda this evening is our celebrations and recognitions, and we will start with Jonas Michael for the Iowa Bandmasters Association Outstanding Administrator Award, and I will turn it over to Amy DeLashman.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Jonas, would you please stand up for a minute? Not that anybody doesn't know who Jonas is. Each year, the Iowa Bandmasters Association recognizes administrators who exhibit leadership traits that support the growth and success of the band programs, students, directors, and school communities. We are excited to announce that Ames Middle School Principal Jonas Michael has been awarded the Iowa Bandmasters Association 2023 Outstanding Administrator Award for elementary and middle school. Michael was nominated by the middle school band directors with an additional reference from Associate Principal Nicole Coronado. Band directors wrote in their nomination letter, "Mr. Michael is a leader who steadfastly supports teachers and students on a personal level. He frequently shares remarks that encourage and affirm us. He challenges us to meet the highest standards and supports us in our efforts." Thank you for all you do. Congratulations.
Thank you, Mr. Michael. And our next item is School Board Appreciation Month.
Yes, May is School Board Appreciation Month. So to you, board, the Ames Community School District appreciates the service and support of the community elected officials who serve on the district's board of directors. These dedicated leaders serve our community and students without compensation, donate their personal time and energy to overseeing the direction of our public education system, and they positively impact our state by ensuring our future citizens have a quality education. There is no token that can show our appreciation for everything you do for our district. Thank you.
Well, thank you. We appreciate that. All right, we'll move on this evening to our discussion items, beginning with our board committee updates, and we will start with the Equity Committee.
We had a couple of items on the committee agenda, although we spent most of the time on the first one and are going to come back to the second one. Director Miller presented some information about the Danielson framework and that rollout and how that's going to be going, but also how that connects into equity and our definition of equity and helping teachers to really dig into that. And that was a great discussion. There are notes here from it, but I encourage you to ask Director Miller if you have any questions about that, because there's a lot of really good things in there that are going to become part of the standard framework.
Thank you. Any questions for Equity Committee? All right, and next we have the Mental Health Committee, which met on April 28th, and I did not get the minutes submitted, so I apologize for that. But we heard a presentation from Jean Mohammed on some of the future directions for the Mental Health Committee, some of the trainings and things that we offered in schools as we are moving forward. And so those minutes will be on our updated shortly in the meeting minutes here. Does anyone have questions for me?
As far as, will there be a presentation to the entire board about kind of future directions of the mental health coordination within the district, or how will that start being seen?
Yeah, I think, Deanie, would it be fair to say that like in the fall, that would be a time that you kind of would have a rollout of the plan for the coming year? Is that okay? Okay. Anything else for mental health committee? All right, we'll move on to our teaching and learning update. And tonight we have a special education program update with Director Deanie Thomas. I think so.
Good evening.
I'd like to take a few minutes tonight to share a special education programs. Starting with, yeah. There we go. Better? Better. Okay. Starting with three major pieces of legislation that impact and inform our special education work in the district. The first two pieces are Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act and the Americans with Disabilities Act, which prohibit public institutions, including school districts, from discriminating against people on the basis of disability. The major piece of legislation that informs our work for special education is the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, which ensures that all students ages 3 to 21 have access to a free and appropriate public education, and particularly covers students who have disabilities. A key component of IDEA is that students are educated in the least restrictive environment possible, and that's defined primarily by access to interactions with peers who do not have disabilities. So in Ames, we offer a continuum of services, special education services, to ensure that students can have access to the least restrictive environment possible within our existing MTSS framework. So MTSS is a multi-tier system of support that all students receive within our system. And so we layer on additional supports as students need them, including special education supports at every tier of our system. Special education includes specially designed instruction. That's one of the things that differentiates IDEA from other pieces of legislation, is that it not only protects kids, but it also ensures that they receive specific specially designed instruction to meet their instructional needs based on their disabilities. So we have, like I said, a full continuum of services. And so if you look at this pyramid here on slide 6, the very bottom of the pyramid, the widest part, every student in our system has access to general education curriculum, to the general education core, and that includes students who have disabilities. And then we have 5 levels of programming for students who receive special education services. And as you go up the tiers or up the triangle, then they become more and more restrictive, which means, again, less access to typical peers. So more specialized instruction and less interaction with peers who don't have disabilities. So I'll just kind of quickly talk through each of those tiers. The first and least restrictive is consulting teacher services, which is where a special education teacher consults with a general education teacher to provide some advice and some guidance on how they can adjust the learning environment, their instructional methods, those kinds of things. That happens completely within the general education setting. The student doesn't actually receive direct services from a special education teacher. They receive all of their services from general education teachers, and the teachers work together to meet the student's needs. The next layer of support is co-teaching services, and this is where a general education teacher and a special education teacher work together to provide all of the instruction within the general education setting for all students. And so it's really, I mean, just what the name says, co-teaching, teaching together, planning together, teaching together, providing feedback together, all those kinds of things. The next layer is collaborative services. So this is where a special education teacher will go into a general education classroom and provide direct services to students within that setting, but only for students with IEPs. So an example might be like during reading block, when students, break into small groups and go to the teacher table and those kinds of things, we might have a special education teacher working with a small group or an individual who has an IEP within the general education setting. Then the last two layers, direct services and then special class, are within a separate setting from the general education setting. So direct services happen during a small portion of the school day. They're delivered by a special education teacher. They're focused on that specially designed instruction that students need based on their disabilities. And they supplement the general education curriculum. The last and most restrictive kind of service is special class service. This is very rare. It's a very small number of students who receive special class service. This is actually modifying the general education curriculum to meet students' very specific learning needs. Again, it's very rare. It happens outside of the special or outside of the general education setting and is provided by a special education teacher who engages in some reverse collaboration with general education teachers to make sure that we're tied to the core. So I went through a lot of things super fast. I'll just pause in case you have questions about that before I move into some district data.
I have one kind of baseline question. I love the way you've split up the tiers. Just rough order of magnitude, like what percentage of our students that are being served in across the district are kind of at those various tiers?
Yeah, that's a really great question, and I don't have super specific answers
It's
for
fine.
you.
It's just approximate.
What I can tell you is that most of our students spend most of their school day, so over 75% of their school day, in the general education setting.
Mhm.
So I'd say that it's probably less than 2 or 3% who are in that very top part of the triangle.
I have a few questions.
Sure.
When you're talking about consulting teaching services and co-teaching, can you talk about how that relationship works between the special ed teacher and the general classroom teacher? How does communication work? How does accountability work? Those kind of things.
Yeah, so it varies depending on the school and the system and the situation. So we have lots of different kinds of ways that that's working. One of the most common ways that we experience consulting teacher services is when we work with like itinerant teachers for the blind, teachers who have hearing impairments or deafness, those kinds of things, and then our speech and language pathologists. And so they will come in. Usually there are set times when those contracted service providers or contracted teachers are scheduled to be in the buildings, and they will touch base with the general education teachers to give some pointers and advice. So that's a little bit different because it's not really our staff,
Right.
oftentimes, who are providing those kinds of services. Co-teaching, some people refer to it as kind of like a marriage. Like if you arrange it, it might work out, but it's really better if people come to that, so people will approach that. There are, I think, 6 different ways that people can approach the actual co-teaching, but really it requires, like anything, lots of trust, lots of planning, and lots of time.
Okay, so I'm sorry, just to clarify terms for me, because I didn't think I didn't understand then. So if you have, say, a student who has, say, special math goals or reading goals, but is in a general ed classroom, you call that co-teaching, not consulting teaching.
Well, it depends on what kind of services they're receiving. Most often, if we have a student who has a math goal, then they would be receiving some sort of direct service for their specially designed instruction. We have some students who are receiving co-teaching instruction as well, where a general education and special education teacher are working together to deliver that instruction. That's probably co-teaching, I would say, is the most rare form of service on our continuum at this point.
Okay, so typically if somebody is, say, receiving pull-out special instruction in math, then you call that collaborative services?
That would be direct services. So the teacher, the special education teacher, is directly providing the service to a student with a math goal.
Okay, but the student is in the general education setting the rest of the day?
Most of the day.
Okay.
In the special class, is that based on the availability of teachers and their expertise? Or if there's a need, do we bring people in for that?
Yeah, no, that's based on, a special class is based on the needs of the students. So we, we try to anticipate and staff appropriately, but if we don't have teachers to cover the need for special classes, we hire more.
Okay.
In any case, can you talk about what the relationship of accountability is between a special education teacher and a general classroom teacher when a student has goals that are being met by both of those teachers?
Say more about what you mean by accountability.
So for instance, who's tracking IEP goals?
So the special education roster teacher is responsible for tracking IEP goals, so all of the progress monitoring. Some IEP goals, we have to work collaboratively. So we have some social behavior goals and things like that where we need to collect lots of different data points over the course of the day. And so then the special education and general education teachers have to work together to get that done. But it's always the special education teacher who's responsible for maintaining the IEP,
Okay.
for entering the data and that kind of thing. I'll just share a little bit about individualized education plans and the kinds of services that we provide here in the district. So this is on slide 13 here is just a snapshot per school of the number of IEPs. And I will tell you that this number changes slightly daily as we have students who are exited, who move in, who become eligible. So it's kind of a rough snapshot of IEPs in the district. And you can see, that we start out, Northwood obviously has a little bit more given the total number of students that they have than our other schools compared to their total number of students. And then if you go to slide 14 here, you can see the per grade breakdown. It's a little bit misleading, the blue line, that's the Northwood line. Northwood and then at the other end in high school are the two areas where we tend to see students repeat the same grade multiple years. So students who have IEPs who come to us as preschoolers will tend to attend preschool for more than 2 years because they'll start sometime during the year when they turn 3, complete that entire year, attend for another entire year as a 3-year-old, and then attend for a 2.5 year, a third year as a 4-year-old. So that's why that number looks so much bigger than the other numbers. And then, like I said, on the other end, we do see kids start to meet goals and not have a need for that specially designed instruction. Maybe they need 504 still. We know a lot of disabilities don't just disappear, but a lot of times kids don't need that specially designed instruction that requires special education anymore. They just need some accommodations and that kind of thing. But at the high school end, because students can stay until age 21 and continue to be educated toward their special education goals, that's the other area where we'll see kids repeating grades. Here's just kind of a snapshot of the number of IEPs per grade level, and you'll notice that the preschool looks really small. And the reason for that is because there are very specific guidelines around preschool ratios, both for special education and for general education. The other reason is because all of our preschool teachers currently are both special education and general education teachers. So a lot of their workload is actually general education as well as special education, which is unique to Northwood. And then the other buildings are fairly consistent in terms of the teacher workloads for special education. There are 7 performance domains associated with special education. And I'll just kind of really quickly go through these. Not all of these do we provide direct services for. And I'll explain that a little bit in a minute. So we have academic goals. So those are your reading, writing, math, problem solving, comprehension, listening comprehension, those kinds of things. Adaptive or adaptive behavior goals, those are your living skills, working skills, just functional skills to adapt to everyday life and surroundings. Behavior, which includes both your expression of emotions, self-regulation, interaction with others. those sorts of social behaviors, communications, so receptive, the language that you get, and expressive, the language that you give. Health, which has to do with both the general condition of the body, the physical body and the mind. So mental health is included with health. Hearing and vision, so the ability to perceive sight and sound, and then physical, which is your gross motor, your fine motor, your mobility. Of those, the main areas that we focus on, because we contract a lot of our speech language pathology, hearing and vision services, things like that. The ones that the most common kinds of performance domains for the district are reading, writing, math. So those academic goals, that's by far the biggest group of goals that we have, then behavior, and then adaptive behavior. And so you can kind of see on this graph, the breakdown there.
So on that graph,
Mhm.
how do we compare compared to like other districts? Like, do we tend to have a higher percentage of IEPs, the same, less? Do you know?
So my sense is that our percentage is pretty comparable to the rest of the state and the country overall.
Mhm.
We do seem to have some pockets, like our preschool program in particular does seem to be blooming in terms of IEPs, and especially for students with more significant disabilities.
And then I guess, and this might be a terminology thing. How do 504s figure into this? Are they overlap with kids that have IEPs, or is that separate and outside of this consideration?
Yeah, so the protections of Section 504 apply to all individuals with disabilities. So Section 504 is kind of an umbrella that would encompass students with IEPs. The key difference in practice is specially designed instruction. So students with 504 plans tend not to need specially designed instruction, but they do need some accommodations or supports, adaptations to the environment, that kind of thing.
Okay, thank you.
So the academic domain has the most goals. You mentioned that.
Mhm.
So I'm going to ask you a leading question.
Oh boy.
Is any of those domains more important than the other domains?
I would say no.
Okay, that's what I was hoping you would say.
Yeah.
But it seems sometimes when we hear there's more goals in that section, we figure that's more important to learn the quote unquote academic goals as opposed to these other areas.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. I don't think, and this is just this is a personal
Mhm.
opinion, not necessarily a district opinion. I think that sometimes maybe we're a little more accepting of some variation in how humans do things in non-academic areas in the school than we are of variations in academic things.
Mhm. Okay. Thank you.
So then what I have for you next is a breakdown of each of the major goal types here by school, except for adaptive behavior, because breaking that down much more would cross us into territory that we shouldn't be in a public meeting of jeopardizing people's confidentiality. So for reading goals, you can see that across schools, fairly consistent. And then once you get into grade levels, again, you see that kind of stepping down pattern as students are meeting those goals, closing gaps, and not needing to have reading goals anymore. Similar patterns with writing goals, except that writing goals are much more rare at the preschool level. And so we won't see that kind of step down pattern when we get to preschool. With math goals, again, the pattern is pretty similar. We have a little bit of a bump at the middle school level in the math goals overall and the math goals per grade level. And then finally, behavior goals. And again, these are the social behavior goals. So the regulating emotions, social peer interactions, those kinds of things. And this is where we see they start to really drop off. I didn't include a breakdown at the high school per grade level because the numbers get so small for behavior goals at the high school level. But that is just kind of a snapshot of special education, and I would be happy to answer any other questions you have.
I have a few questions. So you said there's, different levels of services that children can receive. How do you determine which type of service a child receives?
Yeah, so the IEP team decides that. So we start with, if a child hasn't already been identified and evaluated and all of that, our AEA partners work with families to get consents. They go through an evaluation process, determine that the student is eligible, and then bring in the school team. And so then the LEA, that's us, the AEA and the parents work together to decide what is appropriate programming for students.
And I know you said you don't have numbers, but let's just use reading or math as a goal. How often are they receiving services within their classroom versus direct services where they're pulled out of the classroom?
Yeah, so I would say that, so keep in mind that all of our students, so students with IEPs are general education students first. So all of our students are receiving intervention supports within their classrooms in all areas. For most of our students do receive some sort of direct instruction or direct service outside of the general education setting. It varies a little bit depending on the needs. So like, for example, a Wilson lesson that's a structured reading program takes about 45 minutes. So it's pretty common to see 45 minutes for reading for a student who has that specific need. It varies pretty greatly for other.
So for a child who's pulled out of the classroom for direct services, what's the expectation of for the class period or class time they're missing in terms of that instruction they might be missing?
Yeah, so a lot of times we try to, it depends a little bit on the building and the specific situation. First, that's often addressed in their IEP, so in their activities and their services. We try to schedule those things so at the secondary level during times when they might have study hall or their win time or those kinds of things so that they're not missing any kind of academic instruction. At the elementary, it gets a little bit trickier because there's a lot less of that time. And so it may be during their like independent work time, and then they would have some accommodations or what they're learning in the special education setting counts for the work that they're.
So for elementary kids, because it is a little more difficult, right? Because there's things happening in the classroom all the time. Does the district have a goal of pulling them out less often and keeping them in the classroom and receiving services in the classroom?
It's always the goal.
Okay, so what are you doing to work towards that goal?
Yeah, so we have a couple of schools, Mitchell and Edwards in particular have been doing a really nice job of piloting some things over the last couple of years. We haven't written a specific goal. That's something that we could look at.
Everything I've read from my experience with pulling kids out to read additional services makes it difficult for them with their classmates. And so I would really encourage the school to work towards not pulling kids out and doing, I know it's complicated, but trying to get services in the classroom, especially in elementary school where you don't have those study halls and things that you can pull kids into. For sure.
Thank you for presenting this. I mean, it's obvious there's a lot of work going into helping all our students, and that's awesome.
Yeah.
I guess one final question might be, if you had a magic wand, what would you change that would make it so you could do it better? Like what roadblock or challenge is getting in the way that you really wish you could do something about that you'd like us to know about?
Wow, that's
a good question.
I wish I had known that the question was coming.
I'm sorry, I didn't prepare well.
I think that there are a couple of things. I think first mindset, like Director Linkaitis was saying, we know that having kids being fully included in classrooms to the greatest extent possible is good for everybody. To make that successful, everybody has to work toward a mindset of inclusion and embracing people's differences. So if I had a magic wand, I would love it if everybody can feel like we all belong here and deserve to be in our classrooms.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So to repeat what I think I understood, and I'm sorry, despite having had some experience with special ed in my personal life, I also there's a lot of this that I don't know. It sounds to me from what you said that most special education that co-teaching and collaborative services are relatively rare and direct services are more common. Do you have a sense of what proportion is within each of these? I know you can't give like full percentages, but do you have any sense of what the proportions are?
I don't know.
And how do you
have solid enough numbers, right? I mean, I can find that out and,
Right.
and report back to you, but
Yeah.
I don't feel like I have a solid enough sense.
even to give a sense of half, a third, or not, it got a sense like that. Okay. How do you determine which one of these tiers a student belongs in and what the least restrictive environment is for them and how the system can respond to them? How do you know if a student can get bumped back from direct services to collaborative services or down the pyramid to more inclusive education?
Sure, that's a great question. So again, those are all IEP team decisions. So the parents or the family, and then for older students, once rights have transferred, the students themselves, the school and the AEA work together to look at the convergence of data. So lots of different data sources to kind of make that decision about what would be most appropriate. It's not, I'm not going to say that there's an exact science here because we have to take into account lots of things. So we look at, students' test scores, we look at students' progress monitoring scores, we look at how long it's taking students to make progress towards their goals and what kinds of intensification we need to do of instruction. But we also look at other things like social emotional factors or recent traumas or things that might influence and might lead us to believe that maybe students need a different setting for a little while to reset and come back. Parent request has a lot to do with it too.
Okay. So if you determine that that a less restrictive environment would be, say, co-teaching, and that a kid would be eligible for co-teaching, then how does that dynamic work in the classroom? I mean, and how does, for instance, I imagine that sounds like a hard, one that requires a lot of professional development for the non-special ed teacher, the one who isn't certified in special ed. How does that professional development work?
Yeah, so we have in the past, not real recently, but in the past, this is my 20th year with the district and I was a special education teacher here before. So we have partnered with AEA to provide some really specific training related to co-teaching over the years. Because it's not a model that we have used consistently in the last few years. We haven't, with COVID and all that, we were trying to keep things apart. It's not training that we've provided recently.
Okay.
But yeah, there are definitely trainings available and it is hard to do. And it does require a lot of time and it requires an investment of financial resources. Because to train people, to give people time for planning, to give people time for reflection and dialogue and all, it's an expensive option, but it can be a really good option too.
So what enables that financial, are you saying that a financial commitment from the district, a financial commitment from the AEA?
From the district.
From the district. So the AEA is not paying for that training.
Well, we would pay for the training, or the AEA oftentimes will do training for us for free. The cost isn't so much in the training, the cost is in the carrying it out. Because you have to be able to have time for people to co-plan if they're going to go teach.
Yeah. Okay.
Which means less availability for other things, which means that you need to have more staff.
Okay.
We're hearing a lot about parent choice coming from our legislature. So if a parent hasn't requested an IEP for their student, or if they're even resistant to it, but teachers and others feel that it would be beneficial, I'm curious what steps are taken then? None?
Parents retain the right to give, withhold, or revoke consent for special education and related services at any time.
Okay. That's
So
what I thought.
there's, it is the parent's ultimate right to decide.
All right.
Anything else? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Dr.
you.
Davis. All right, next item on our agenda is the proposed 2023-24 school fees, which is Dr. Hopkins.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Everybody's doing well. Okey doke. So tonight for discussion is a review of the draft or the proposed fee schedule for the 23-24 school year. You can see overall on the first page that there's not a proposed increase to the authorized fees that would apply to all students. So the general textbook rental fees that are assessed to all students are proposed to stay the same for next year. And as you scroll to the next page, you'll see some changes. So specifically, just starting from the top, the middle school and high school replacement fees for the IDs and padlock, I would propose that those are actually fines. So the board is to approve the fees assessed to students. Anything that is lost or damaged, property that is damaged, that's a fine, not a fee. The guidance from the Department of Education draws a distinction between those two. I would argue that those are both fines, and thus the reason that they're proposed to be removed isn't because we no longer might assess that exact same amount of money to a student. It's because I would suggest it's a fine, not a fee. But there were no proposals to increase the cost. So this isn't like taking it off to increase the cost someplace later. It's just that it's probably not appropriate, in my opinion, on a fee schedule. There were some things that were proposed to be increased in costs. So from a process standpoint, buildings were given the opportunity to look at this list. At times work with the specific departments to get an assessment of are the costs that are incurred within your department increasing. And therefore, when you see recommended changes for increased cost, it's coming through that process because those departments are incurring those costs. So you can see there's a couple of suggested increases for the cost of robe cleaning, particularly the band robes at the high school. You'll see that both the middle school and the high school have proposed an increase of $10 each, respectively, to the activity ticket. And both have indicated that I apologize, I'll need to make that change, that they call it an activity ticket, not an athletic ticket, that ticket would work to get into activities as well. You can see a proposal for a $5 increase to the cost of the yearbook. It is, of course, a voluntary purchase for students. Another proposal for an increase to a cleaning fee for madrigal costumes, and then a new fee that had not previously been assigned to students was the cleaning of the DECA jacket. The proposal of that sponsor was to get that on the fee schedule so that could be assessed to students for dry cleaning of that jacket. Fees that have regularly been charged to kids that we do need to add to this schedule are the fees for driver's education. That $325 has been consistent for the last several years, and actually the contract for driver's education extends through one more year, and then we'll renegotiate that contract, and you may see 2 years from now a proposal for different fees for that. And the cost of reimbursement for a failed PSEO course is set by PSEO legislation, but it is $250, and it would be appropriate to have it, in my opinion, on our fee schedule. We have charged that in the past, but we have not had that on our fee schedule. And then, at least from what I'm hearing, for the first time in many years, there is a proposal to increase the fees for transportation. Those proposals, typically range anywhere from $4 to as much as $16 for the total cost. Nowhere even come close to the amount of increase in cost over the last several years for transportation, but a nominal increase in fees, at least in my opinion, a nominal increase in fees was suggested. What questions could I answer for you as you think about what will be brought back to you as a final draft?
I think that I'm pretty sure that we have talked about this a year ago and talked about the same set of fee increases, and I just don't fully remember all the answers. Can you talk about how the fee waiver system works? I understand that it, I get the basics. The document explains that that there's a full fee waiver for free for free lunch students and a half fee waiver for reduced price. But how does that work in practice? And does it apply to all fees, some fees? What?
Chris, do you mind if I let you hop into this? Thanks.
So students who qualify for free or reduced lunch, their parents can request to have their fees waived. It is not automatic. It does have to be waived. It is the parent's choice. Sometimes the parents choose not to waive fees. You might have a situation where you're just going through a little bit of a rough patch and I can't afford lunches, but I can afford my fees. I don't want them waived. So it's a personal choice on the parents. For free, it's 100%. For reduced, it's 60% is the reduction. It applies to all mandatory fees. So it would apply to the textbook fee. Is that what we're calling it now? It would apply to transportation. That's one that DE has said that even though it's a discretionary busing and a choice, it is a waivable fee. Anything that is related to student activities would not be waived.
Okay.
So your activity tickets, that's a choice. That's not something that is required. Driver's education, did I say driver's education? Driver's education is one of those that the state has said that every child is required, I think, to take driver's ed to get their license, not necessarily through a school district, but that is a waivable fee. The non-waivable fees are going to be anything that is not required for curriculum. So if you notice, instrumental rental would be required for the class. That would be a waivable fee.
Okay.
The cleaning of a DECA jacket, that's an activity, that's a choice of a student to participate in that activity. That's not waivable.
Okay. Really, I guess, kind of small thing. You said 60%. This memo, it says 1/2. Unless I'm seeing something wrong. So third paragraph down or fourth paragraph down on the first page, fee waivers are available for low-income students. Required fees will be waived for students who qualify for free lunches or meet other specific eligibility requirements and reduced by 1/2 for students who qualify for reduced price.
I think we'll have to check. I thought it was a 40% charge, but maybe it's 50.
All right. Yeah, we'll check and make sure that we address it next time as you're voting.
It's set by statute. So whatever the statute is what we do.
We could also, if the board feels like it's a better way to communicate with our community, we could create a key and asterisk those fees that are able to be waived as per this, if that is a better way to communicate.
I mean, I think that would probably be helpful for parents and students.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
I think that'd be great.
I appreciate the feedback. Again, that's precisely what this is for.
Yeah, for instance, parking. I mean, is it optional? Is it required? I mean, getting to school is required. Probably there's some other way to get to school for most students, but yeah.
Parking is optional.
Yeah, parking is, to be clear, parking is
But, I
optional.
mean, but yeah. I would imagine there are a lot of students who don't feel like parking is optional, but yeah.
Right, yeah.
I
Yeah.
imagine there are a lot of
We,
people
we
who don't.
will,
feel-
we will certainly mark this based on
Right.
code, not on how people might feel, but.
Right, right.
We'll mark it, yes.
Clarifying that would be helpful, yeah.
I mean, the only one that, I mean, you know this, you would know the one I'm going to say. The one that continues to bother me from the equity lens is the activity one.
Yeah.
I get how it's not required, but we want our students to feel like they can come to activities and do things. I would love for us to consider and maybe talk about in the future what we could do to see if we could make it so kids could get that at a reduced rate too, given our goals and things we'd like to accomplish.
Might I propose that we figure out a way to help provide support for students to go to activities that don't include us reducing that fee, but
Yes.
still accomplish the goal.
Accomplishing that goal. I mean,
Yeah.
we want student belonging, we want students coming. I love seeing students at not only athletic events, but you know, the arts events, things like that.
Sure. Yeah.
And it seems like it seems like a small barrier that maybe we could do something about.
I know there are creative solutions that others have used that I'm sure we can replicate.
The activity fee is that just for sporting events? Or is it for art?
No, they want it to be an activity, not athletic fee.
Okay.
So they want it to be for.
And it's a revenue into the student activity fund, not the general funds. So we're fairly limited on what kind of revenues we can generate in that fund. The activity tickets is one, fundraising is another, gate admissions. So.
In fact, they're very specific in their feedback to me this year in the process of changing the name to an activity ticket rather than an athletic ticket.
And my understanding is the conferences raise the prices as well, that because I had it going through my whole group that everybody was getting asked to raise their prices. So some of it was generated by the conferences.
Well, I appreciate the feedback. Just to summarize for myself, a way to denote those fees that are waivable, clarity around the 1/2 or the percentage of reduction, and then ongoing work on ways to find ways to get students to activities who want to be there, who may not be able to afford the activity ticket without necessarily violating that code.
Also need to update the date under authorized student fees. It says 21-22.
Yeah.
I apologize. Can you help me see where that's at?
Yeah, you just scroll past
Oh,
it.
First page.
Gotcha. All right.
Okay,
Very
yeah.
good. Thank you. Appreciate that. Good catch. Okay. Thank you very much. Blaine.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Dr. Hawkins, and we will, we didn't have anyone sign up to speak under discussion items, although I forgot to check the Zoom. Let me check real quick. It looks like, I'm assuming public forum for both of these. So I will go ahead and open our public forum and read our statement on public comments. Residents of the district, students attending the district, parents or guardians of students attending the district, and district staff members may address the board about any topic relevant to the district, whether on the current agenda or not. Those who wish to speak must sign up at the beginning of the meeting. Speaker participation is limited to 3 minutes once per item. The views and opinions of citizens addressing the board do not necessarily reflect those of the board, district administration, or staff. Speakers are to remember that Iowa law prohibits the board from discussing specific employees, students, or their performance. Student speakers will state their name and school. Others will state their name and address.
Richard Darrow, 505 8th Street, apartment number 2. I spoke 2 weeks ago about those buttons, and you said something to the effect that you would check out to see whether I could do it or not. I tried to call that number that was in the one of those things, but I kept getting in the answering machine. And I couldn't get it. It doesn't have your address, phone number on it either. Just says I don't know. I don't have a phone myself. I don't have a computer. I don't have email, and it's like I'm kind of wondering. Did you said you wanted to talk to somebody? Did you do that?
So we're not able to discuss anything that's not on the agenda, but if you'd like, I'd be happy to talk with you after the meeting, and I can update you on what I found out, okay?
All right.
Okay, thank you. All right.
You're not gonna close it like you did the last one, are you?
No, we don't have any closed sessions after this meeting. All right, Brittany Lansgard.
The ACSD board purpose.
I'm so sorry. Can you state your name and address for me?
Yeah, Brittany Lansgard, 3502 Willowbrook Circle, Ames, Iowa, 50010. Okay. The ACSD board purpose statement is as follows. The Ames Community School District commits to equity and access that empowers every individual to reach their full personal and educational potential. We believe that you as a board keep this in mind when making decisions that directly impact our students. We also believe that time and concern was taken by the administration to identify budget cuts with the aim of minimal harm. However, the current solution to remove, shift, and share teachers in the related arts throughout our elementary schools presents challenges for students and teachers. Additionally, doing so goes against the district's stated priorities and strategic planning goals, which we will address individually. Educational equity and improvement. Educational equity ideally means that every child receives the necessary resources to reach their full academic and social potential, both inside and outside of the classroom. This extends beyond the instruction and encompasses a child's sense of safety and belonging, which are fundamental prerequisites for learning. Without feeling safe and a part of the community, learning is impeded or cannot take place. Teachers devote a considerable amount of time to building relationships with their students, establishing a mutual trust. Respect develops for each other through consistent structure and expectations in and outside of the classroom. The current solution is akin to pulling a brick out of the foundation of a house. It will reduce meaningful teacher engagement and available time to invest in student relationships, resulting in more difficult class management and an increase in negative behaviors. Students with individualized education programs who already face untenable challenges in a regular classroom, as well as students with attachment difficulties, will be particularly affected. Related arts teachers regularly use their time to create a sense of community in the school and undertake activities that foster camaraderie among students. This is evident in the extra time they spend with children in the gym, the art display in the halls, monitoring lunch and recess, helping staff a club for the girls in STEM, working at PTA events, and more. This encourages positive behaviors, increased socialization, higher student achievement, and more efficient classroom management. Because our related arts teachers see our students year after year, they know them well and can interact with them on an individual level.
Thank you, Brittany. Ulrika Genschel.
Ulrika Genschel, 3205 Red Fox Road, Ames, Iowa. As one special education teacher at Kate Mitchell put it succinctly, when Kate Mitchell had to share fine arts teachers with other schools, there were many years when we had no art on the walls, no choir, and no field day. This ties directly to the opportunity gap for disadvantaged students at any school. Suboptimal availability and engagement from our related art teachers will exacerbate the opportunity gap for disadvantaged students and widen the equity gap due to inconsistency in staff and teaching styles. Around 48% of students at Kate Mitchell come from families with low economic status. These families have limited resources to supplement their children's public school education and activities with external organizations. Additionally, this change will impact meaningful collaboration between teachers and staff. Working together across classrooms is essential to ensure consistency for students during the transition between teachers. This involves using the same teaching method for provided curriculum, as well as the same methods for handling student behaviors and expectations. A simple example, a former kindergarten teacher illustrated this by sharing how she relied on the related arts teachers in the building to ensure consistency in basic activities, such as how to correctly hold scissors. Without a related arts teacher available on-site, permanent or on-site all the time, these basic skills are taught inconsistently. The second aspect is transparent financial planning and process. Our group of representatives has spent a considerable time analyzing data for the Ames Community School District and 2 Iowa districts that are most similar in size. We have met with our district CFO, we've consulted with our HR director via email, examined individual Ames elementary school fact sheets, and utilized various resources to search for data that is not always publicly available or easy to find. We have organized this data in a manner that highlights the comparative inequities within the Ames Community School District and to those similar sized districts. We have provided a link to the data via email and have copies available for review tonight. We are under the impression that when the budget is prepared, enrollment numbers matter most. Enrollment numbers do matter, but only to the extent to establish the exact dollar amount the district has available for spending purposes. Within the financial boundaries, we believe that the district's diversity, equity, and inclusion and student support staff need to play a bigger role and do so at the earlier stages of the budget formulation to not lose sight of the district's equity commitment. Communicating with EEI and support staff or staff directly engaged with the students at Kate Mitchell, for example, could have informed the district about the proposed cuts and how they will disproportionately affect the elementary school already experiencing the most inequity. Thank you.
Thank you. Megan Traxel.
Hi, I'm Megan Traxel from 2409 Suncrest Drive. District priority number 3 is recruitment, retention, and development of a high-quality staff. While removing 3 teachers seems like a clear deviation from this point already, this decision has a longer-term repercussion in retaining high-quality staff. According to a 2012 study by Johnson, Kraft, and Papay, high teacher turnover rates occur primarily in schools within significant low-income and minority student populations, such as Mitchell. These findings are largely attributed to unsupportive work environments like those that occur by reducing prep time and increasing individual student load. The proposed sharing of teachers across several elementary schools meets exactly these criteria. Undesirable and inefficient work environments for teachers at the schools with substantial populations of low-income and minority students. While Kate Mitchell has the largest share of these populations, Sawyer, Meeker, and Edwards serve them as well. If public education is to provide effective teachers for all students, then the schools those students attend must become places that support effective teaching and learning across all classrooms. Priority 4 is clear and consistent communication to support positive and proactive community relationships. From what we can discern, the first public hearings regarding the budget occurred on April 24th, while contracts were due to the state per state law, April 30th. Although likely unintentional, there was little time for affected stakeholders to react to these proposed cuts. Fellows PTO today put out a letter, a petition that received over 265 signatures during the workday today. But this still does not allow time for parents not on social media during work hours to react to this decision. This proposed budget will also have continuing effects with respect to communication across these stakeholder groups going forward. Related arts communication to parents will be hindered because of the number of students, sections, and buildings that the teachers will have to manage. History is a great teacher. Sharing sections among schools has not worked in the past. Teachers traveling between schools have less time to do more prep and less time to get to know students outside of their 40 minutes of weekly FaceTime, leaving them with less time to be engaged in each school community. Finally, priority 5 is a safe and responsive system that promotes the mental health and well-being of every individual. The mental and long-term effects of inequity are obvious. Classroom management and consistency impacts achievement in all areas, especially for marginalized students. In addition to having the highest percentage of economically disadvantaged students by almost 8%, Mitchell has the highest Black and African American and Latino student rates in all of the Ames elementaries. Mitchell staff do a wonderful job trying to bridge the disproportionate gaps already created by socioeconomic reasons, but this choice specifically and actively pushes down students who are already disadvantaged within our society. While this solution is based on enrollment numbers, removing these positions specifically affects the Mitchell Elementary staff and student-teacher ratio, as well as many Mitchell families who don't have the resources to speak for themselves.
Thank you. Amanda Thompson?
Amanda Thompson, 3323 Red Fox. Proposed solutions. We realize that actionable, sustainable solutions are important and needed. We believe that such solutions can be found and include retaining full-time related arts teachers for all elementary schools. We will not be shy about asking the district to rehire the art teacher specifically full-time at Mitchell either. Losing her implies losing the time her parents volunteer at Kate Mitchell. Our students depend on an optimal learning environment and the goodwill of volunteers and deserve to have an art teacher like her. We understand that we do not have full knowledge of budget-related intricacies, but we have identified some solutions that we believe deserve full consideration. We gathered data from the CFO and HR directors to learn more about EAs and substitute teachers. Per an email from the HR director, on average, 8.44% of all teachers are absent each day in the district for non-work related reasons. With 396 full and part-time teachers, this averages out to 33.5 teachers out every day. This number does not count additional staff for professional development, athletic, scholastic, or other club events. Hiring EAs and substitute teachers is costly. HR resources are needed for reviewing applications, interviewing, onboarding, expenditures for advertisement, background checks, and more. These expenditures will only increase the district loses when they lose the current contracted substitute teachers due at the end of the ESSER funds. Offering related arts teachers to work as substitute teachers to round out their full-time hours has multiple advantages. First, it allows the district to look for high-quality personnel in-house, saving time and expenditures needed when hiring from outside. Second, our students will have a substitute teacher they know, respect, and trust more often. Frequently changing substitute teachers is inefficient at best and not conducive to learning. Third, it provides consistency and familiarity to our students, reducing poor behavior and lost teaching time. Fourth, additional time available to related arts teachers due to insufficient enrollment can be utilized for administering tests for children with 504s and IEPs that require quiet testing. Lastly, several related arts teachers we talked to expressed a clear interest on taking on these responsibilities. This would be a true win for all, the district, the related arts teachers, and our students. Thank you.
Thank you. Mary Daly?
Hello, Mary Daly. My name is Mary Daly. I live at 3103 Cedar Lane, Ames, Iowa, 50014. We were unable to obtain complete information about the annual costs of all surveys and external consultants. However, we did learn that the Panorama survey alone costs $23,500. With about 1,000 family responses, this averages out to roughly $23.50 per family response. While we understand its value, we are unsure that everyone looking at the results for guidance understands that the results can offer limited insight due to voluntary response bias. Responses will be skewed toward individuals with internet access and time to complete the survey in the first place. We encourage the district to think more creatively to obtain similar data more reliably, especially given the on-staff data research and assessment specialist and robust in-community resources available at Iowa State University, who not only has statistics and data science faculty and students, but also the nationally recognized Center for Survey Statistics and Methodology. The Amazing Ames magazine costs $32,271.11 in just postage and printing in 2022. In the first 3 quarters of this year, that cost is already $28,156.23, which results in a rough estimate of $37,541.64 overall for this fiscal year. This does not include the staff hours to write, photograph, and design the magazine. Additional staff hours go toward the podcast. We ask if the district recently did a cost benefit analysis to better understand if these marketing expenses result in a net gain for the district. We imagine also that many parents would prefer retaining face-to-face teachers over in-district promotional materials. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Angie DeWard.
Hello, I'm Angie DeWard, 3103 Whitetail Lane here in East. We also performed a homegrown unofficial market equity analysis of the 2 most closely sized districts in Iowa, Bettendorf and Ottumwa, roughly 500 fewer and more students respectively. In stating the following results, we do not wish to criticize or question established district salaries. Rather, we wish to point out the message sent by looking at just the raw numbers. For the 22-23 school year, administrators were comparatively paid $10,000 more than the next highest school district, while the average teacher was comparatively paid $2,000 less. Our school district has the lowest teacher but highest administrative pay, and this gap will grow with proposed salary adjustments emailed to the board earlier. We additionally compared the number of employees at the district office to the district offices in Bettendorf and Ottumwa. Again, we realize that we likely have an incomplete picture, but the overall sentiment was still the same. Even after making adjustments to remove admin positions, we do not have the DO in Ames. The next district in size has only 64% of the administrators that we do. Areas of note within ACSD are a large increase in IT individuals as well as supporting staff and HR. Dr. Lawson's 100-day plan report dated December 16th discussed how staff feel that recent hires at the district level have contributed to a feeling of top-heavy administration among staff where personnel budgets have been reduced at the building level. This comes at a time when student services and needs are paramount. In light of this, we feel that the district needs to prioritize face-to-face positions for our students. The proposed teacher cuts in Ames maintain the top-heavy status quo rather than addressing what benefits students. Our last proposed solution is free, more equitable representation of all schools in the district. This can be achieved by having a school board and district office parent and/or teacher liaison from each of the district's 8 schools. The liaisons have the knowledge of each school's unique culture and situation. Doing so will help all populations be represented and have a voice. Thank you so much for listening to our concerns. We know that your time is valuable and your care for our students is apparent and unquestioned. We stand before you as a group today, hoping to have illustrated that retaining all full-time related arts teachers for all elementary schools, including reinstating the art teacher at Mitchell, is not only important and vital for optimal student outcomes and equity across the district, but that with creativity, this can also be achieved financially. Thank you.
Thank you, Angie. Natalie Key Russmanis.
Good evening. My name is Natalie T. Russmanis at 3007 Evergreen Circle, Ames. I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to speak and thank you for your hard work for the students in the community. I'm here to share a petition result that has collected over 160 signatures in the last couple of days regarding French education at the Ames High School. The petition is titled, Request the Ames Community School District to hire a new French teacher at Ames High School. You got a copy of the petition. It has come to our attention that the current full-time teacher, French teacher, is retiring at the end of this semester, and there has been no job posting to hire a new French teacher. It is not clear to us if the school district has an internal candidate for the full-time position and or is planning on hiring a new part-time teacher. In our understanding, based on 2023-2024 enrollment, French needs 8 sections, meaning we need a full-time teacher for 6 sections and an additional teacher for the other 2 sections. If you can share any information that is available today, that'd be much appreciated. If not, and there's no plan of hiring a new teacher, we urge you to take action quickly to find a qualified candidate to ensure there is no gap in the French education for the current and incoming students at Ames High School. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Natalie. Roth James.
Good evening. I'm Roth James from 150 Campus Avenue, Ames. We received an email on April 28th from Dr. Lawson informing us about the budget cuts that are being made to the district. He, and I quote, remains committed to fiscal transparency through ongoing engagement with you, our families, students, and community members. In this same email, we learned that he and CFO Chris Stensland knew about and started planning the budget cuts as early as January. It has not been transparent. We're being informed after decisions are made. This email is all we heard about this process, and not even our principals were allowed to speak about these cuts until April 28th. I am here to claim that district office and the school board have unfairly targeted the classroom, particularly at the secondary level, when the district has faced budget cuts made by inequitable decisions and refusing to bear any of the financial burden themselves. We as staff and administration should be working together at all steps of the process to consider reducing or combining positions at all levels of our district, keeping our students at the forefront of the decisions being made. Tonight, the school board will be approving a 3.2% increase in base pay for administrators, contrary to the report in the April 28th Ames Community School District budget snapshot that everyone will be receiving a 2.79% increase in their total compensation package. Teachers' base salary increase is less than 0.1%. Additionally, this is in line with the district's 5-year trend from 2018 to 2022, where administrators have seen an increase of 16% to their average salary over 5 years, compared to teachers' increase of 1.3% to their average salary over the same period. This data was collected using Iowa Department of Education's school district financial report card for Ames. We live and work in a school district where the people who run it, who are furthest from the classroom, decide how much they make. They decide who takes the burden of the budget cuts and who continues to get raises. The teachers who are closest to the students and who inarguably have the greatest impact on their success are faced with the awful decision of who among us will sacrifice their job so that the rest of us have the resources to keep teaching the kids. The least that you could do is actually have the transparency you claim. Ideally, district office could take just some of the burden and some of the cuts and ease the pressure on the rest of us. Yes, there might be some reorganization necessary, but not any more than what our actual schools are already doing. We are also understaffed. Additionally, although any reorganization at the top would be inconvenient, it would not be nearly as detrimental to student success as any reorganization in any of our schools. Remember that the role of the district office is to support educators to best meet the needs of all students in the district. Despite all the positive communication regarding our impact to the district, do you even truly know what's happening in our classrooms? I can count on one hand the number of times I've seen district office personnel during school hours at AMS this year. I have more, but it seems like my time is up, so thank you.
Thank you. Okay, and then we do have at least one person signed up to speak via Zoom. Don Wallingford, if you can just start out by stating your name and address. You've been given permission to speak. You might need to unmute. Okay, you're still, I don't know if you're speaking, but you're still muted. If you can unmute, and then you should be able to speak. Okay, I think we'll have to go ahead and move on. But if you do come back or you watch this later, you can always email us with the remarks that you were planning to make. And then we also have Laura Lee Medina signed up, but she's no longer in the meeting, it appears. Okay. All right, then with that, I will close our public forum and move on to our consent items.
Okay. I motion we remove consent item C, reappointment lists.
Second.
Okay, any discussion?
Is there an implication of this as it relates to legal connection to offering contracts to teachers? I mean, this is basically the vast majority of our staff, and I know in talking to teachers today, they're looking forward to getting contracts. So how does this play out?
That's a great question that I don't
Hold
have.
on. Should we be discussing it now? Because we haven't approved it.
Well, but I suppose Alan's asking.
I'm
whether
asking
you're
about if
removing
we
it,
removed
pulling
it, would that cause a problem?
So, I mean, it would pull it to discussion items.
Right.
Is that?
Oh, because it's
Yeah.
not
Would it pull
tabling.
it for discussion
Okay,
We
if we're
shouldn't
talking about
discuss
pulling
it
it
until
for discussion.
until we have?
Gotcha.
Yeah,
Okay.
so
Yeah.
that's, so we need to vote on that before we can discuss it.
Okay. Yep.
Okay,
Do we need to discuss why we want to pull it, or do we just save that?
okay.
Sorry.
You can plead your case if you would like to do that before we vote.
Yeah, I would just like a little.
Oh, no, I'm sorry, we can't discuss it till, okay, so we'll vote, we'll vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay? Okay, thank you.
I
So
move-
we've just voted to discuss it before including it in the consent items?
It's moved later, so
Confused about what we've just.
I move we approve the remainder of the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Okay, so then we will move to gifts to the district, Superintendent Lawson.
The superintendent's office received the completed form for and recommends acceptance of the following gifts. At $2,500, we received 2 ADA wooden picnic tables from Iowa State University Civil Construction and Environmental Department for the benefit of Edwards Elementary. $556 cash from Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Ames for the benefit of the Hope Pantry. $277.37 from Northminster Presbyterian Church for the benefit of the Hope Pantry. From Iowa Realtors Association, as part of Project Jack, we received $250 cash for the benefit of Fellows Elementary. We received $100 cash from Couples Club One, a group of the ISU Women's Club, for the benefit of Hope Pantry. From Marlene Geiger, we received, excuse me, $25 cash for the benefit of the Hope Pantry. Another $25 cash from Joan and Dennis Sen for the benefit of the Hope Pantry. And from John and Laney Hill, we received $20 cash, and again, for the benefit of the Hope Pantry.
Thank
Those
you.
are gifts for the district.
So I'm sorry, we're not able to allow questions at this time. So it was moved by Beerbaum, seconded by Franzen to approve the consent agenda with the removal of item, now I forgot what item.
C.
Item C. So all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Passes 7-0. Okay, board secretary, can we now discuss the pulled item?
The board has the discretion of where they put it on the agenda.
Okay,
Yes,
so
I would say that's your discretion. You can put it, some people put it at the beginning of the action item, some put it at the end of the action items.
okay, gotcha. Let's go ahead and put it at the beginning of the action items. Okay.
So, yeah, I just, we've
We need
heard.
a motion.
Yeah.
I move approval of the reappointment list for 2023-24.
Second.
Okay.
Okay.
Now we can discuss.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
I think I need more clarity. I think there were some questions raised about the percent increase and the different groups that have been raised in some emails we've got. And I'm just a little unclear because it looks to me like maybe the math is not how I understood it. So I'm not ready to approve this because I have equity concerns.
Yeah. I haven't run the number systematically, but it does look like there's a 3.23% increase in every item on the administrator's list, or in every position on the administrator's list, with the exception of the one place where we have a person shifting positions. But in everybody who's continuing in the same position, it looks like there's a 3.23% increase in administrator's base salary, whereas there's a lower percentage increase in all the other positions, and a lower and variable percent increase in all the other positions. So if we could talk about that, that would be helpful.
Director Stinsland, would you be prepared to talk about that?
So the package is still at 2.79%. There are a number of positions that the board has already approved that are not on the reappointment list that were hired at lower salaries. So so the middle school principal, the high school principal, and well, there'll be a recommendation at some point coming for the Meeker. We don't have a salary on that yet, but those aren't in there. And when you put those decreases in, it reduces the total salary increase for all of the administrators to 2.35%. With the 10% increase in insurance, that brings the package up for all of the administrators to 2.79%.
So the new hires are being hired at lower than the original, than the people whom they're replacing.
Yes.
Okay. And that was how the 3.23% was determined, was because it was what made the math balance out? Unset 2.79%?
Right. I do what in Excel, what's called goal seek to a 2.79% package by increasing the salary. And I do that for each group. And we've consistently done that. And if there were other groups where I knew that we had already hired people at different salaries, sometimes it's the opposite. Sometimes we've hired people at higher salaries than what their predecessors have. And that then reduces the amount of salaries that's available for other people in the group. So it's hit both ways. It just happens this time that we had two principal positions that based on experience and education were way high on the salary schedule. And the ones that are coming in are lower on the matrix that we use for administrator salaries.
So the 2.79, I'm sorry, I'm trying to get to why, I'm still not sure I understand why it looks like 3.23 wouldn't, because it's for the group as a whole,
except for the superintendent who the board sets.
Yeah, that's
the superintendent's salary.
Right.
So yep, we have one association or union, which is the teachers, and then we have I'd have to look at how many, but 5 or 6 what we call meet and confer groups that they have like benefits, they have like salary structures. So each one of those that you see is a group within itself that is considered as a group.
So if I can clarify that would be the same across all those groups. So within one of the other groups, the 2.79% wouldn't necessarily mean every person in that group is getting exactly the same increase.
2.79% is the package.
Right.
And then it just depends on the group. So the EA group specifically, there is such a wide range of hourly rates and number of hours they work and number of days they work that we calculate that on a per hour increase. So the EA group gets a 30-cent increase as opposed to someone that's higher at getting 2% and someone lower getting 2%. Just because of the way that group works, it's just not feasible to do it on a percentage basis for each employee. And it affects our beginning rates there as well. But everybody else, it's a percentage.
And so for the teacher group, it would depend also on the salary schedule.
So on the teacher group, it's going to vary greatly on whether they're still moving on step. So when it's a 2.79% package again for the teachers, which adds that 10% insurance increase, but that also includes steps. So even before we put anything on the base, we were at over a 2% package just for moving everybody on steps and that insurance increase. So each individual within the teachers is going to be a little bit different depending on where they are on the education, on the horizontal, and where they are in the vertical on number of years they've served with us. And the ones at the top have maxed out their steps, so they don't get a step increase. So it's specific to each group how it works.
So do we have to adjust administrator salaries in a separate category from, say, adjusting administrative support or EAs? or technology, or, I mean, we have different categories, and do we have
Right.
to adjust
So-
salaries separately within each category?
So when you're looking at a total compensation package, the reason we have different groups is they might have different leaves. They might have, in our case, everyone in the district gets only 100% of single paid. We don't pay anything towards family. But when you're looking at that total compensation package, the higher the salaried person, the less the insurance is as a total part of their compensation package. Or if you're looking at, for instance, in the A group, where you might have a salary of $15,000, but health insurance of 10,000, health and dental and all those other insurances of 10,000, that insurance is a much higher piece. So that's why we look at those groups differently. That's always been the way in all the districts that I've ever served in. You look at those individual groups who are like in their salary and benefits.
Okay, but what that would effectively mean is that, say, for the EA group, there would end up being a lower percentage increase in salary because of the higher relative impact of
And
the impact
they,
of health
the
insurance.
EA staff in particular work basically 10 months and get 12 months of insurance, where our custodial group works 12 months and gets 12 months of insurance. So
there's something disquieting about looking, I mean, I haven't run all the numbers. I'm seeing numbers run by somebody else, but there's something disquieting about seeing that we are giving a 3.23% increase in salary for administrators across the board and like substantially lower percent increase
In salary.
in salary. Yes, in salary, I understand. For existing continuing employees in other categories. It makes more sense to me now how we arrived there, but it feels it's disquieting. It's concerning for me.
I think in a previous year, it was the reverse, wasn't it?
that's what I said, some years
Yeah.
when
Which felt weird that year too, because
Right.
yeah,
when we've hired people that there's been a number of years where we've hired people that have come in higher than their predecessor, and then that takes away the percentage of salary that's available for all the other administrators within the group. My goal when I'm looking at budget is that the cost of the package will be X, and that's what I calculate into budget when we're looking at what we need to do for budget modifications. So a 2.79% package for each of these groups is going to cost X, regardless of how you get there.
You said, and that's how most districts calculate that?
The districts that I've been in, I mean, teachers are usually on a
Right, there's
salary schedule based on, and it depends, my previous district, I had 5 unions and 5 meet and confers. We just have the one union here. So in those groups, and we didn't pay 100% of insurance. And so sometimes more was put on salary and less on the insurance, but you have to be affordable under the Affordable Care Act. So you have to be considered there. In my previous district, the teachers and administrators got 90% of family insurance paid. So our salaries were lower. I know in some of the numbers that we were presented today, I know those districts, that's the case in some of those. I know that some of the districts provide a large contribution to the 403Bs for their administrators because there's no FICA or IFRS on that. And so it's a way to get additional salary to employees without those related payroll taxes. So you really have to look when you're looking at groups across districts to understand how their benefits are structured. And on ISB, they do a really good job at that, of showing those different pieces of how you get to all those different compensation packages for different groups.
Yeah, thank you. I have a better understanding how the package works as a whole. I agree. Because it's looking at the whole package, it feels, I don't know, there's something that bothers me about it because I'm thinking about what money do people have to pay bills, and your insurance package doesn't do that. So And this is me just, I'm trying to better understand how districts tend to do this. So,
And it depends on the culture of the districts, how they, like I said, my previous district paid 90% of family insurance. I had my husband on family insurance because it was very cheap, but my salary was quite a bit lower. When I came to Ames, it was single. I made my husband go on his employer's insurance, which he had to pay for, wasn't even 100% a single. But it was still cheaper, but my compensation package was almost exactly the same when you looked at all of it. And I know that's hard because people don't view the insurance as you're saying, paying the bills, but it is a very important benefit that
no,
people have.
it's an important benefit, but when we think about increases, that's where the disparity seems to.
Yeah. So a different way to do this would be to assess the I'm not suggesting that we need to go back and redo this all right now because I don't know. It's May 8th. But a different way to do this would be to calculate the 2.79% across all groups and then to look at how this affected. So instead of trying to get to 2.79% within the category of administrators, which ends up with 3.23% for continuing employees, would be to calculate the 2.79% across all groups in, but like to aim to add.
We couldn't do that on the teachers group because that's negotiated.
Right.
So of the 1.3 million of salary and benefit increases, almost $1 million of it was the teachers group.
Yeah, I understand.
So about 300,000 was the rest of all of those groups that you saw.
All right.
I think one additional question we got that I know from previous budget discussions, and I just wanted to clarify, maybe with you, Chris, the district office expenditures for district office staff. I know last year went down by 15% or so. I think the year before that went down in some way too. And I know this year there are open positions and aren't being hired, so it's effectively going down again. I don't know the exact number, but if I remember right, one of the reasons those numbers can look the way they do is because is it the TLC?
Yeah.
There's something about like the teacher leadership things like
Right,
that
so-
end up looking like their district office. but
Right, so
really
we have a
aren't.
number of staff in the district office that are in the teachers group.
Yeah.
We have a number of staff that are in the technology group. We have a number of staff that are in the admin support group. And then a number that are in the administrator group. The teachers that are based in this building are grant funded. They're funded under the teacher leadership compensation grant, which has to be used either for that purpose or for teacher salaries. So that's a new law that just passed that we could use it for TSS purposes, which is in addition to the negotiated settlement. It's not, it can't replace it. It's in addition to it. So those positions, that money would have to be used for a different purpose and could not be used to.
Yeah, I think one of the questions we got was just why that number in district office looks large for our district in particular. And I think it probably comes down partially to how those get counted in other districts. Because districts might not be consistent in how they count those type of teacher grant recipients.
And it depends too how districts allocate their staff. So I know that the business office staff was not one of the ones listed, but the benefits person, the person who administers all of our health insurance, is in HR. In a lot of districts, that's in the business office. So in those districts, I know in Ottumwa, the benefits person is in the business office staff, because the Ottumwa business manager has done a lot of communication with our UEN group on staffing and who's where. So it's just a matter of it. You can't always just compare raw numbers.
Yeah.
To know if it's apples to apples.
And I know last year we did an extensive study and look at that. And if I remember right, I thought that study showed that our administration staffing overhead compared to other districts was actually fairly the same or lower, if I remember right.
I would say we're low.
Yeah, and that was a study across all the different staff, regardless of buildings, based on function and role and everything.
Alan, when was that study?
It was done with Dr. Vincent led that as part of the budgeting last year.
About this section.
Yeah, okay, I remember that talking about the staffing model. Okay.
Yeah, the staffing model, and the staffing model looked at it more as functional roles as opposed to which building that person might be technically assigned to, or
She was comparing us not to other districts, but to, I don't know what framework.
Well, there was a
Right.
difference between the
It was
staffing
some
model,
framework.
which was based on student numbers. It was based on ELL. It was based on free and reduced, that determined kind of those support roles out in the schools, like counselors and nurses and those type of things. And then there was the administrator compensation model that she put together that determined it. Basically, we had kind of hired administrators based on whatever they requested, kind of, and it's hard to explain, but administrators are market based, and so we compete with the metro. That's a difference in another. Sometimes, you know, Ottumwa's kind of down there by itself, and would compete with smaller districts. We're competing with larger districts, but she put that salary matrix together that said this is the base salary, and then we add on for years in the district, we add on for years in of administrative experience, we add on for a master's degree or a PhD. So there were two different ones last year.
I think the main takeaway I wanted to get at is just a reminder to the board that last year there was an extensive amount of work put into this to baseline us compared to those studies, and to look at some of the things that Chris was mentioning there, to really kind of put us on the right track for that, because we hadn't done that in a while.
No, and I recall some of that. I guess trying to remember back to that, I thought that had to do more with positions than dollars and salary increases.
Yeah, and it was relative to a model that had been put together from my memory, not a comparison to other relative districts. I would also point out that Bettendorf, I would say it's in a metro area.
Yeah.
It's a relatively wealthy school district in a, you know, not as big a metro area as the, you know, central Iowa, but it's a decent metro area.
I also happen to know that Bettendorf provides a 30% contribution to their administrators 403B that's not recorded in their salaries, as well as providing family insurance.
So thinking about what our presenters from the public forum had to say, I'm wondering if there's a way we can get this rationale out about how this works to the community and teachers, to even our board, before we get to this point with misunderstandings about how we arrived. Is there a way to do that next year, or as we go move forward?
So we might want to make sure that we're focusing on, our discussion should only be on the motion on the table. I'm not discounting your question. I appreciate it, but we'll want to make sure that we're discussing the motion, which is whether or not to approve the reappointment list.
Fair enough.
The point you're making, I would encourage you to make in comments from the board, though, as a thing for next year.
Okay.
Not that I'm discussing it right now.
I feel like there's got to be a better way to do this, but I also realize that we need to take action on this now. So I guess that's kind of where I'm at, and I'll save some comments for later about maybe what we could do.
Yeah, I remain really uncomfortable with what we have here.
So can you share related, I mean, I know this is, what are the implications of postponing a vote on this?
For the teachers, I don't believe there's any implications. I think those contracts are already out. The contracts are out. I think there's probably, maybe not with, like the technology staff and the administrative support staff and administrators. Actually, I think administrators, their contracts have to be out by, May 15th, right?
That's right, yeah.
They are continuing. Right. So the administrators might be a little bit different. I think it's just more that as soon as those reappointments lists are down, we get those letters of we call them letters of employments for the rest of the staff. They're not contracts. We get those out. So Kristen, do you want to come up and help me out? Thank you.
There is there are several implications. Is this on?
You're on.
Sorry.
Yep.
Is it okay? It's on? Okay, thank you. There are several things. Administrator contracts, we do want to get them out because we want to have them that settled and get them committed so that they'll stay here. Once they sign it, then it's harder for them to leave. So there's also the question of continuing employment for purposes of unemployment. So when a school district employee who doesn't work year round, doesn't have a job during the summer, the district does not have to pay the unemployment taxes if they file for unemployment, as long as they've been assured of, or they have reasonable assurance of employment next year. Until we get those letters out, the Iowa Workforce Development will not say that our employees have reasonable insurance of employment next year. And that would apply then to all the other employees.
So our administrators, they're 12 months though, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And our facility staff is too.
But to be clear, if we postpone it, it's the whole list, not just the.
Yeah, I was just trying to clarify.
Yeah.
I'm wondering from the board perspective, acknowledging that there's some questions and desiring to better understand how these package increases are, equitably distributed among our staff, I would say. I think that from the board perspective, we have a really high level job of setting an expectation for our staff in terms of how those things are, how they carry out the work of the district. I'm wondering if that's a broader conversation that we have at another time, but possibly allow the business to continue on. That's what I'm thinking through in terms of the reappointment lists and the work that the district needs to do because they are running a business. And we are in the final stretch of school, and thinking if there are concerns that board members have about an approach that the district has taken, and if we need to better understand that approach and better understand other districts and how they're managing that, perhaps that's a time. I think we're doing maybe a retreat in July, but maybe that would be an opportunity for us to better understand it. And if there's a different direction that we feel like we'd like the staff to consider, that we would make that suggestion at that time.
Yeah, I think as we think about kind of from the board perspective, that goal of recruitment and retention of staff, that this is an important issue because perceptually, right, it doesn't look equitable. I understand that I'm getting a much better understanding of how it might be, but
the one thing I would add is that we never settle on all of the other groups until we're settled with the teachers. And we settled considerably later this year with the teachers than we have in most of the time I've been with the district. So that's kind of crunching that timeline too.
Yeah, I realize that's been.
Yeah, everything was delayed this year and partially because of property reassessments and things like that. I understand all of that. And given how much everything was delayed this year, I have no desire to hold up the business of the district. And also, I'm really concerned that our spreadsheets ended up producing a result that looks really inequitable. And I don't know what to do about that.
I think that's the key part where I'm at is what would be, if we delayed, what would the change be?
I'm not suggesting that we delay.
I'm
not suggesting that we delay.
I agreed. I'm just, as I'm looking at this and considering it, I don't see in my head for the overall situation any change that I would be discussing. So I think I like the idea that might be brought up later. And I also think this idea of having the board have some more understanding of this process through the retreat, that sounds good. But I think we need to allow the district to move forward with the business of the district.
so I'm not sure if it's appropriate to say it, but I'm seriously considering voting no on this, which is not something I typically do. And it's not because I want to hold up the business of the district, it's because I don't think that this process doesn't feel equitable to me, and it doesn't feel like a solution that is in everybody. Yeah, I'm having a hard time getting to yes on this. And at the same time, it's not because I don't see holding up the district's business as being appropriate here.
I think it's totally appropriate, obviously, for you to say that you're considering that. I mean, that's what we're discussing, right?
Yeah.
Just to make sure that you do know the options. There could be the opportunity for a different motion. If we wanted to ask staff to do something different and bring it back at a later date.
Yeah, I mean, we could request a reanalysis of the data in a way that produces a more equitable solution. I don't know. It seems like that would be extremely hard to get to.
I don't know that it would be, in my mind, it wouldn't necessarily be a reanalysis of the data, but we would be directly asking them to do a different, plug in a different number.
Or to recalculate in a way that pools data in a way that produces a more equitable outcome.
I mean, I think it would just be reducing the percentage for the one group, probably, is what we would be asking for, right?
Or, I mean, pooling categories strikes me as a more equitable.
I don't think we can pool categories because of the salary schedule and the fact that
I
the teachers is
understand we
negotiated.
can't do it for teachers. I understand teachers are in a pool apart. I didn't understand that we couldn't do it for pooling, say, administrators with custodians.
Well, there is the opportunity to make a motion if you would like to.
So the problem is that I don't know that we have time.
No, custodians have a salary schedule too.
Oh,
So custodians there's it's not a salary schedule, but they have categories within theirs. They used to be a union. This is the first year that they did not recertify. So we moved all of their union contract into the handbook. So it's pretty specific to that group, that maintenance custodial group. The EA groups have different hourly rates depending on whether they're a regular EA, whether they're a special ed level 2 EA, level 3 EA, whether they're a preschool EA. So
that's why I was saying the option that I would see would be to ask for a lower percentage on the salary only for the administrators that are listed.
Okay. I mean, so that's one possibility. I'm not trying to take away money from the whole pot. It seems that the increase in money, I'm not trying to make the pie smaller. I'm suggesting that the pie could be better divided to make the increase in it more equitable across all categories. I still haven't quite understood why it wouldn't be possible. I didn't entirely understand the explanation for custodians, but from what Chris said, I didn't hear a reason that we can't say pool administrators and EAs.
I don't feel like just those two groups would accomplish an equitable outcome either, though.
I think that the reality of the situation is we have an appointment list. We have people that have an expectation based on that of what they would be agreeing to. And anything we would do at this juncture would be taking from one set of people and moving to another and would make somebody unhappy. So this is why I think it might be better to consider for the future.
3.23% from somebody's making $150,000 a year and increasing 1.5% for somebody who's making $30,000 a year. I'd kind of go for that.
So again, so for instance, the total package, I know they presented the EA because that's all I got asked for was salaries, but the total package for the EA group is 4.2 million or almost 4.3. This is FY23, 4.3 million, which I think they said 2 million. So about half of that salary, the rest is benefits.
But the benefits are the same across the categories, right?
No, not actually. The EAs get plan 4 paid for.
Yeah,
everybody else in the district gets plan 2 paid for.
sorry, Plan 2 versus Plan 4 means,
different deductibles and out of pockets.
okay, and what's the relative value of Plan 2 versus Plan 4?
Well, they're both high value plans. They're both what would be considered Cadillac plans out in the public.
Okay,
Plan 2 is a $250 deductible and Plan 4 is $1,000 deductible.
okay. So we're saying
that make less.
So we're saying that the EAs are getting $1,000 deductible and there are other categories of employees who are getting a $250 deductible. But the EAs should be grateful. Sorry.
I don't think I said that.
Okay, and I just, sorry, you didn't say grateful. You didn't.
I guess I'd like to ask if you're going to make a motion.
Okay,
We have to make.
I am not sure what I can ask for at this point.
It'd be an amendment.
It'd be an amendment.
Amendment to the motion already on the table. Thank you. Yes.
Okay, so what is our deadline for submitting the, I mean, a deadline by which we need to have, but by which administratively we need to have all of this taken care of?
Kristen.
Microphone.
There is no statutory deadline for offering the contracts to administrators. Is that your question?
Okay, so there's no statutory deadline. At what point do we start to incur problems with respect to unemployment insurance and things like that?
At the point that when people may be looking to go and take a job somewhere else.
Okay. So we have no clear deadline by which we need to have the salary numbers approved.
Well, I would say probably, at least by July 1st.
Well, yeah, obviously.
For the 9-month staff that could apply for unemployment, it would be by the last day of their contract year.
Yeah,
Because they
so the
have
last day of school.
Yeah.
So the last day of school is May 31st.
They don't have days after that?
No.
Not support staff.
Okay.
Okay, so last day, so that would by May 31st in terms of applying for unemployment insurance. Though we're not talking about laying anybody off right here in these numbers.
No, but they would need that letter
For
in
continuation
hand.
of benefits, right?
Yeah.
We need to provide them reasonable assurance that they have a job next year
Right.
by the end of this school year, or they will get unemployment and we will be liable for it.
Yeah. So to be clear about the salary increases that we're not talking about, that none of these salary changes involve laying somebody off.
No.
Right.
No.
Yeah.
No, that's separate.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah. So I'm hearing from what it sounds like that there's not as much urgency as I thought there was, though I would still like to get these numbers taken care of as quickly as possible because I think everybody needs to know what they're making next year. But it doesn't sound like there is an immediate deadline by which we need to have these salary changes.
I guess I would just say from the board perspective that it is really important to know what our staff will look like next year.
I understand.
And that it's late already. So yes, there's no no statutory or contractual deadline. But that doesn't mean to me that it's not urgent,
No,
that there's
I'd
not a sense of urgency.
I'd like to see this done. I don't know if we can have if our motion can have a date on it or what, but I mean, we meet again before the end of the month.
Right.
And I feel like that a lot of the people that this concerns would at least appreciate the time for us to discuss whether or not this is equitable or as equitable as it could be.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like a greater reason to leave a district is inequities, but.
Right. And especially when the inequities are affecting the people, I mean, I guess inequity by definition applies most importantly to people at the bottom, but in this case, there is substantial inequalities that are affecting people at the bottom of the pay scale.
I would also like to mention that it can take weeks to get folks to sign their letters for next year to know that they're going to be back. And once we don't have them in our buildings anymore, it's a lot harder to get them to get their attention. They don't check their emails. They don't, so to find out for sure if they're coming back, we want to have as much time as we can before the end of the school year to have, get that wrapped up.
Okay, so our next board meeting is May 22nd, Monday, May 22nd.
We could have an emergency meeting, I would assume, right?
This wouldn't qualify for an emergency meeting, I don't believe, Chris, would it?
Well, an emergency meeting is a meeting you call without 24 hours notice, so
Or
a special meeting. A special meeting
Special
could certainly
meeting
be called.
Specifically to deal with salary increases.
Chris, we're talking administrator salaries, and we're talking about a difference from 3.2% to what percent?
Well, so the
Approximately.
total increase for the administrator package is $100,000. So
Okay, that's what I was getting at. The delta we're talking about is, if anything was changed, is what?
and 10% of that's insurance, which can't be changed.
Yeah.
And FICA, FICA and IFRS follows the salary. But in the dental went up a little bit. So the amount I'm not saying philosophical, if we want to reduce the administrator salaries, that's not perfectly fine, but the amount that's saving is not going to be a substantial increase to the EA group. There's
Because
too many
spread
of them.
across all the others,
Right.
any other staff
Yeah,
group.
could you
is
share
significant.
if that, I know we've asked you a lot of things that you were not prepared for, but
Yeah.
are you able to share if you took that down to zero for the increase, how much savings that would be?
I think I ran that before the meeting and it goes from 105,000 down to 20.
Now, what is
Sorry,
that?
so 0%,
What?
0% increase for administrators.
Okay,
reduce from
75,000, is that what you said?
From 105 to 20? Sorry,
I don't know what we're talking
Zero.
I'm confused.
If the administrators get no increase at all,
Right.
it would be about an $80,000 savings.
And if you spread that among other groups, that would be. So if you, how much can you share again? How much was in the total teacher? Like, what is the total amount spent on the teacher package?
Just under $1 million.
So I guess the reason I asked is I understand the philosophy that we could discuss as going forward, but pragmatically, the amount of change would be very small for any of the other groups because the administrators are in. I remember this from the last time when it was the opposite.
I'm not sure if that matters to me, though.
Then can you want to make a motion?
Yeah. I guess, do we need to, we would need to move the whole item and.
So you would move to amend
You'd move the amendment on the floor, which is to approve the appointment list as presented.
And do we add
Then you can do whatever you want as far as the amendment.
So we have to amend and vote and then make the amendment.
You would amend and then vote on the motion as amended.
If the
Okay, so they need to make the
amendment
amendment.
passes.
Okay, so you would need to
Yeah.
vote to amend the motion, and then if you want to table it, you would have to table it to a date certain, so the date of the next meeting.
Okay, so first we're voting on whether we will amend without.
No, it's an amended motion. So,
okay.
I move that we amend the motion to table this. Nope.
That'd just be tabled.
So if you want to move to table, you're going to move to table to the next meeting. It's always to a date certain. And then it will be taken off the table at that point. I don't believe I don't have my, well, you can do either, but you don't amend and table. You either table or you amend.
Okay.
So here's what I want to do, and then you can tell me how to sit, okay? What I want to do is I want us to go back and see what it would look like if we had equal percent salary increases across the groups where we're able to do that. That's what I want to do.
That's what I would like to do as well. Yes, I would like to do this. I would like to do it as quickly as possible, even if it means having another meeting.
Yeah,
I think adding an extra meeting to the schedule.
And I would suggest that you
table, you would just want to table this because we can't.
And you'll table it to the next meeting.
Yeah.
So if that's a special meeting, then it's that date, or else it's the next regular meeting. So you'll want to table to the next meeting.
Okay.
All right, so I move that we table it to the next meeting.
Second.
No discussion, no vote. So as long as it's moved and seconded, it's tabled.
Okay.
And my computer fell asleep. All right. Moving on to our next action item, delivery for notice and filing of superintendent's recommendation to terminate the contract of a non-probationary teacher at the end of 2022-23 contract year for just cause.
President Shields Cook, I am delivering a copy of the notice and recommendation to terminate the contract of a non-probationary teacher for notice and filing. No discussion or action is to occur at this time.
Thank you. All right. The next action item is the 2022-23 proposed budget amendment and setting date and time of public hearing.
I move the board order the board secretary to publish the proposed budget amendment and to set the date and time of the public hearing for May 22nd, 2023 at 5:30 p.m.
Second.
Moved by Beerbaum, seconded by Linkaitis. Discussion?
So to make it clear for us and for the public, this is just for the current existing budget, which means it really has no implication for what's happening next year.
Yes, this does not increase revenues, does not increase taxes.
Right.
It is amending our statutory control lines to adjust for it. So for instance, we added some positions under ESSER funding after the start. Remember, the budget's prepared 18 months ahead of. So we weren't quite sure what we were doing with all the ESSER. I tried to estimate in the nutrition fund how much reinstating meals, and then we did universal breakfast. So that's part of it. And then under the other area, or the construction area, we bought LSI. I mean, that was a purchase that wasn't considered when this budget was put together.
Yeah.
Any other discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, nay. Passes 7-0. Policies for action.
I move the board approve the policies as presented.
Second.
Moved by Winfrey, seconded by Franzen. Discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Passes 7-0. Student representative board and staff items will begin this evening with our student representative, Will.
Hello. So I know very complicated budget wise, but I know there has been a decent amount of concern among high school students, at least, about not rehiring the current teachers that are retiring, particularly when it comes to language education. I know it was already mentioned tonight, but specifically with French, I have a lot of friends in French who are worried about if those will continue next year, because I believe, from my understanding, the teacher who was able to teach that class will not be able to meet the current size and number of students taking French. So there's just been some worry. So I wanted to bring that to you and maybe talk after the meeting about that.
Thank you. All right, items from the board. We'll start with requests from staff, which I did write down a few this evening. So first, for Director Thomas, the percentage of collaborative versus consulting teacher versus direct services. And then we had on the fees, whether the percentage fee waiver is half or 60%, which fees are waivable, and then for a future discussion, how to allow student inclusion without eliminating that fee.
And salaries.
And then we will come back with much more discussion about salaries.
Can I ask a clarifying?
Sure.
Yeah. So if we're not going to have a special meeting, we need to get those reappointment lists on the next. Do we want to just recalculate and do new reappointment lists, or do you want? I'm not sure what I'm being asked to do at this point. I mean, I understand your philosophy of what you want, and I can do that.
I think that we probably need to do a special meeting and maybe ask you to come with a couple of different options, Chris.
That would be great.
Yeah, I think at this point, probably I'm sorry it creates work for you. But, yeah, I think a few different options are probably what we need to discuss.
And
How
I
do
would
we
ask
get to the most equitable solution, given the legal constraints we have.
if board members want to pass along feedback or suggestions or ideas to me, I'll compile those to share with admin.
Yeah.
Other items from the board?
So to reiterate what I started to say earlier, there's an old phrase that statistics lie. It's not a pejorative phrase. It just means that looking at numbers themselves can lead to different conclusions, and it doesn't give full background and context to what those numbers are. So whether we decide to amend what we talked about earlier, or whether we leave it the way it is, I still want to suggest that we find a way to communicate our process and the rationale behind the numbers we come up with, so that the community, teachers, board members, everybody can understand how we got there.
Yeah.
Whether we agree with it or not, that we find a way to make it clear so that there's not this kind of confusion and stress that we bring on by just thinking the numbers will speak for themselves.
Right.
Thank you. Thank
Yeah,
you.
and I would say, I mean, and I know that this year was unusual and we had delays in terms of building the budget that we just had to deal with. So it is what it is. But yeah, I think more communication and clearer communication certainly can help.
Well, and I would commend Dr. Lawson for the email that he did send out widely with staff, in that I think that was more communication than actually I've seen in some years past. It was maybe later than we would have liked, but I think that's something we could take up and talk maybe in the retreat this summer, for example, of how this process could look next year.
I'm going to make a comment just because I am the legislative liaison and because we have people in the room. This is frustrating for all of us because since 2017, the state has shortchanged public education. Please take your frustrations beyond us. We are told what we get, and I know it's so frustrating to see and try to understand how these educators make the decisions they do, but please help us. And I'm going to quote a senator that sent us some information that, so we are provided, it's a student cost per pupil. So that's what we're given from the state. So the percentage is that this year alone, this was last fall, the state shortchanged your kids' education by $742 in 1 year. That's 9.1% cut to relative to inflation. So if any of you have a kid in 6th grade, I do, your child has already had their education shortchanged by nearly $1,600. Please, please, I know that our area representatives have a tendency to be in favor of some increases, but please help us because we advocate for this. We are trying to spread the word that we cannot short public education the way that we have. Because when that happens, these are the kinds of decisions that our administration have to make, and we have to sit here, and my heart hurts every time I get an email from many of you. So understand that we all do, because we want to figure out, and we're challenging our administrators, how do you navigate this? How do we support you? But it stinks. So please understand, we hear your concerns, we understand them. Help us to share the message broadly, please. Thank you.
Yeah, I would also say, I don't fully understand the situation with the AEA. Depending on how you count it, we are looking at either flat funding for the AEAs or dramatic cut in AEA funding, depending on how you calculate the budget, the way the budget changes look. But we just had a big special ed presentation. Special ed is going to be very hard with declining support for AEAs. So that's a major issue to talk about as well.
Any other items from the board?
I'm looking forward to the end of the year, and students had prom, and there are good things going on too. We're in budget season from our perspective, but kids are excited and doing things and out having track and field events and all sorts of things. So.
I would like to, we were thanked for being on the board for board appreciation. It's also teacher appreciation this week, and I'd like to applaud all our teachers who are out there every day supporting our children.
All right, items from the superintendent.
No items from the superintendent outside of thank you, teachers, for the work that you do. This has been a really tough process. And so just know that we are pushing forward with everything that we have. And we'll continue to do that for you. And happy Teacher Appreciation Week. And happy Board Appreciation.
All right, so board planning calendar, we will work with JD to schedule a special meeting as soon as we possibly humanly can. Outside of that, our next regular meeting is on May 22nd. Anything else on the board planning calendar? All right. And then we will take a short recess here, we'll take about 5 minutes, and we'll reconvene for our work session, and we'll be ending our live broadcast at this time.